If you ever wanted to see nature at its most unforgiving, you'd start here. The Drake Passage, a stretch of ocean so feared, so violent, that sailors once whispered its name like a warning. For centuries, this narrow band of water between the southern tip of South America and the frozen edge of Antarctica has swallowed over 10,000 lives and sent more than 800 ships to the bottom of the sea. It's only 600 miles wide, but those miles are a gauntlet. Here, winds scream with nothing to slow them down. Storms erupt without mercy. Currents twist with incredible force, and the waves, walls of water rising like moving cliffs, have overturned vessels old and new. Even in our age of advanced navigation, the passage still claims victims. As recently as 2022, a modern cruise ship was struck by a monstrous wave, shattering windows and taking a passenger's life in an instant. And lurking in these waters is another threat: massive icebergs, some so large that NASA once tracked one drifting through the region that was twice the size of London. It's one of the wildest, deadliest pieces of ocean on the planet. But before we break down why it's so dangerous, we need to understand where this place truly is and who first dared to discover it. Stretching between Cape Horn at the southern tip of Chile and the South Shetland Islands off Antarctica, the Drake Passage occupies a deceptively simple location on the map. But this narrow band of water, roughly 600 miles or about 1,000 kilometers wide at its tightest point, serves as the only true open gateway between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans at these latitudes. It's a choke point, a crossroads, and a test of endurance all at once. Even today, sailors who round Cape Horn will often pause at the memorial perched on the cliffs above, a monument dedicated to the estimated 10,000 mariners who never made it through. Geographically, it looks like an empty gap between continents. In reality, that gap is the result of a monumental shift in Earth's history. Scientists believe that between 17 and 49 million years ago, South America and Antarctica finally split apart after being connected for tens of millions of years. When that separation occurred, it opened a deep water corridor that allowed a massive ring of ocean flow, the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, or ACC, to begin circulating freely around the entire Antarctic continent. And this single current would change the planet. The ACC is often described as the most powerful oceanic system on Earth. It moves more water than any other current on the planet, and it does so without interruption. No continents stand in its way. Instead, it circles Antarctica in a continuous loop, carrying enormous momentum with it. This flow doesn't just transport water, it also traps cold around Antarctica, blocking warmer northern waters from encroaching. That thermal isolation encouraged the rapid growth of the Antarctic ice sheets, which in turn reshaped global climate patterns. The opening of the Drake Passage wasn't just a geological event, it was a climatic turning point. But that same uninterrupted momentum becomes a problem when the ACC slams into a confined corridor, and that corridor is the Drake Passage. As the current squeezes through the gap between South America and Antarctica, the energy it carries has nowhere to disperse. Water accelerates, waves steepen, storm systems amplify. The Drake Passage is essentially the release valve for the Southern Ocean's pent-up power, and every ship that ventures across is forced to confront the result. Beneath the surface, the terrain adds yet another layer of difficulty. The seafloor here resembles a rugged mountain landscape, with troughs dipping as low as 11,200 feet and ridges rising toward 15,700 feet. Sharp changes in depth scatter currents in unpredictable ways. Underwater slopes redirect water upward, feeding the towering waves that roll across the surface. Deep valleys channel flow into fast-moving jets. It's a hidden maze, constantly reshaped by the ocean above it. Despite all of this, the Drake Passage remains essential to modern navigation. Large cargo vessels benefit from its open water route, which avoids the narrow twisting channels of the Strait of Magellan or the Beagle Channel. The passage also serves as the primary highway for scientific missions headed to Antarctica. Nearly every expedition that departs Ushuaia, the southernmost city in the world, must take this path to reach the Antarctic Peninsula. And with Antarctic tourism expanding, an increasing number of cruise ships also attempt the crossing each season. The dangers are well known, but so is the necessity. For many, the Drake Passage isn't a choice. It's the only viable route. Its strategic importance, geological history, and raw power make it unlike any other ocean passage on the planet. But this usefulness comes at a cost, because not every journey through the Drake Passage ends as planned. The story of the Drake Passage begins long before modern vessels attempted to chart it. The first known record comes from 1525, when the Spanish navigator Francisco de Hoces reportedly saw signs of open water south of the Strait of Magellan. His crew had been pushed off course by violent winds, and what they observed suggested a channel linking the Atlantic and Pacific. On early Spanish maps, this stretch would later appear as Mar de Oces, a quiet acknowledgement that he may have been the first European to glimpse it. Half a century later, in 1578, another name entered the narrative, Sir Francis Drake. Although Drake himself never sailed directly through what we now call the Drake Passage, one of his ships was blown far to the south during a storm, drifting beyond the limits of the known map. That unexpected detour proved something crucial. There was open ocean below South America. The long-held idea of a southern land bridge connecting the continents simply wasn't true. But it wasn't until 1616 that the region was crossed deliberately. Dutch navigator Willem Schouten intentionally rounded Cape Horn, steering directly into this treacherous waterway. His successful passage confirmed that a navigable route existed, and his report spread quickly across Europe. Suddenly, the world had a new path, a path that bypassed the narrow, twisting confines of the Magellan Strait. It was wider, more direct, and far more dangerous, because what followed was a grim chapter in maritime history. As more ships attempted the route, the Drake Passage gained a new reputation, not as a strategic shortcut, but as a graveyard. One of the earliest tragedies came in 1741, when the British ship HMS Wager became separated from its squadron while rounding Cape Horn. Hammered by brutal weather, the vessel crashed against rocks off the Chilean coast. What happened next only deepened the horror. The surviving crew, isolated and starving, split into factions. Mutiny broke out. Of the 120 men who had set sail from England, only 10 eventually returned home to tell the story. In 1819, another disaster unfolded, this time involving the Spanish vessel San Telmo. The ship was en route to Peru with a crew of 684 men when it vanished in the Drake Passage. The last sighting placed it in severe weather, and it almost certainly sank shortly after. Had any of the sailors managed to reach land, they would have been the first humans in recorded history to set foot anywhere in Antarctica. But no trace of them has ever been found. Then came perhaps the most legendary ordeal to take place in these waters, Ernest Shackleton's endurance expedition between 1914 and 1916. Shackleton's crew hoped to complete the first land crossing of Antarctica, but fate had other plans. In early 1915, their ship became trapped in sea ice in the Weddell Sea. Over the following months, the shifting pack ice crushed the hull, eventually sending the Endurance to the seabed on November 21, 1915. Yet the crew's ordeal was far from over. They survived for more than 500 days in the frozen wilderness, living on seals and penguins. When the ice floes finally began to break apart, they launched their lifeboats and reached the desolate shore of Elephant Island. From there, Shackleton took 5 men in a small open boat, the James Caird, and crossed the Drake Passage itself in a desperate attempt to find help. After 16 perilous days, they reached South Georgia Island and secured rescue for the rest of the crew. Miraculously, not a single man died. More than a century later, in 2022, researchers located the wreck of the Endurance on the seafloor. Its strikingly well-preserved condition stunned historians, a frozen time capsule resting in the deep. But while the heroic saga of Shackleton belongs to the past, the dangers of the Drake Passage absolutely do not. In the same year the Endurance was found, the modern cruise ship Viking Polaris was hit by a 16-meter wave while crossing these waters. The impact shattered windows, injured 8 passengers, and tragically killed a 62-year-old woman. It was a sobering reminder that even with satellite forecasting, reinforced hulls, and state-of-the-art navigation, the Drake Passage still decides its own terms. And that raises the real question: what makes this stretch of ocean so uniquely deadly, even today? To understand why the Drake Passage has earned its fearsome reputation, you have to look at the forces that shape it. And it begins with one of the most powerful engines in the global ocean, the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, the ACC. This current is a monster. It moves more seawater than all the world's rivers combined, an unbroken conveyor of water circling Antarctica without any continent to slow it down. At peak transport, it can push an astonishing 150 million cubic meters per second. And when a current of that scale hits the narrow gap between South America and Antarctica, the same gap that forms the Drake Passage, the flow accelerates even more. It's like squeezing a fire hose. The narrower the opening, the harder the jet. That concentrated energy fuels the passage's most iconic threat, the waves. In extreme conditions, they can tower up to 65 feet, nearly 20 meters high, true walls of water. These waves form as the ACC is forced through the restricted corridor, their size magnified by winds that race across the Southern Ocean with no landmass to interrupt them. The result is steep, fast-moving waves that can hit from multiple angles, a nightmare for any vessel, no matter the size. And then there's the wind itself. In the latitudes known as the Furious 50s, wind systems circle Antarctica endlessly, growing stronger as they travel around the planet. By the time they reach the Drake Passage, gusts can blast past 70 miles per hour, pushing surface water, churning storms, and battering ships already struggling against the current. Add to that the swirling eddies that form where frigid Antarctic waters collide with warmer waters to the north. These circular currents spin unpredictably, shaking vessels with relentless turbulence. It's what sailors call the Drake Shake, the constant side-to-side thrashing that can turn even the largest ships into helpless toys. But the threats aren't limited to water and wind. Icebergs can drift into the passage as well, and some of them are enormous. In 2021, scientists tracked the giant iceberg 8076 after it calved from Antarctica's Ron ice shelf. At birth, it measured roughly 4,320 square kilometers, larger than the island of Majorca. The biggest piece, A76A, stretched 135 kilometers long and 24 kilometers wide, giving it a surface area nearly twice the size of London. Over time, that iceberg drifted more than 2,000 kilometers, eventually sliding straight into the Drake Passage. A slab of ice of that magnitude could tear through a hull with catastrophic force. Because of all this, navigating the passage isn't just a technical task, it's an art form. Captains study weather windows, pick their timing carefully, and sometimes steer off their intended course simply to meet the waves at a safer angle. As Captain Stanislas Dehaene put it bluntly, "The ocean is stronger than us." Every decision on the bridge reflects that reality. Taken together, the unstoppable ACC, the towering waves, the brutal winds, the chaotic eddies, the drifting ice giants, it becomes clear why crossing the Drake Passage has always been something more than a route. It's a wager with the sea, one where nature holds all the cards. The Drake Passage stands as far more than a stretch of ocean on a map. It's a symbol of raw natural force, of centuries of maritime ambition, and of the extraordinary courage demanded from anyone who dares to cross it. Every wave, every gust of wind, every shifting current is a reminder that the sea still writes its own rules. And even as technology advances, even as ships become stronger and forecasting becomes sharper, the passage continues to reveal the limits of human control. For explorers, researchers, and travelers, it remains both a gateway and a warning. A place where history is carved into the water and where every crossing carries the weight of those who never returned. And yet, people keep going, driven by curiosity, duty, or the simple desire to reach the edge of the world. So here's the question we leave you with. A century from now, will humanity finally tame the Drake Passage, or will it remain the ultimate test of seamanship on our planet? Let us know what you think. Thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into one of Earth's most extreme places, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next exploration.